It was a daring operation shrouded in secrecy. And only now, 10 days after Ukraine began its incursion into Russia, do we have what Kyiv says are pictures from the first hours of their surprise assault on the Kursk region. The Ukrainian military claims this is the surrender of Russian forces at Sudzha on day one. Now, less than 2 weeks later, they say they control 82 settlements, with Ukraine's army chief telling President Zelenskyy that they continue to gain ground.
Mr. President, the forces of the offensive continue their operation. In some directions, we've advanced 1 to 3 kilometers towards the enemy. The fighting is ongoing along the whole of the front line. In general, the situation is under control. Everything is going according to plan.
Ukraine says it wants to force Russia to the negotiating table, that either the images of surrendering soldiers or of elderly residents having to flee their homes will shift the Moscow mindset. Authorities in Russia say that more than 200,000 people have now been evacuated. Here, they queue for aid outside the Russian Red Cross in Kursk.
There was shelling, so we couldn't take anything with us. We rushed and drove at night.
While Russia appears unable to stem the Ukrainian advance inside their own territory, they are maintaining their own assault in the areas they occupy in Ukraine, and claim to be making headway in Donetsk, capturing the village of Serhivka, as they begin to encircle the key city of Pokrovsk, with Ukraine ordering residents there to evacuate. With no let-up in the Russian attacks, Ukraine is attempting to strike back. At least 2 people were killed and 7 injured after a shell hit this shopping center in the Russian-controlled city of Donetsk, with the Moscow-imposed governor of the region blaming Kyiv. President Putin chaired a Security Council meeting today. He's maintained his keep calm and carry on blaming someone else stance, with one of his advisors accusing the West of planning and orchestrating the Ukrainian incursion that has so surprised Moscow. As soldiers return atop captured Russian tanks from Kursk, Kyiv says they are still causing more damage, with reports from Russia that the Ukrainians have destroyed a bridge on the Siem River. For Kyiv, that would cut off a supply line connecting Kursk to the rest of the Russian Federation. For Moscow, it would also make civilian evacuations more difficult. A 2.5-year-old war, once mired in stalemate, is moving once more, but still with no end in sight.
The Ukrainian MP Alexandra Ustinova spends a lot of her time in the United States talking to and lobbying American politicians. I spoke to her earlier in Detroit and began by asking about the contrasting advances Russia and Ukraine are both making.
Putin was trying to set up his requirements for agreements and negotiations to Ukraine. Right now, it's very difficult for him to come up with the same agenda because he had already lost some of the territories on his own. And it changed the paradigm of the war. Ukraine cannot compete Russia with the number of people, with the number of the equipment, with the number of weapons. Unfortunately, we are outnumbered. But what we can do is some asymmetrical moves that actually hit the Russian army hard and make them run.
But for that bargain to work, eventually, you're going to have to hold on to the territories, the Russian territories that you've occupied in the Kursk region and elsewhere. Are you going to be able to do that?
This operation totally changed I think even the geopolitical attitude and paradigm what Putin looks like. First of all, he looks weak because he cannot protect even his own people. Second, everybody was afraid in the world of escalation. And honestly, every time I heard the word escalation, I was saying that Ukrainian people have allergy to this word. Because every time we have been asking for the new types of weapons, we had been told that it's going to be escalatory and Putin is going to use the nukes. What we see right now, even when his own country is invaded, he's not going to use it. And he's not even talking about it. He's bluffing. And it will give the opportunity to Ukraine to gain more opportunities in terms of weapons, in terms of lifting restrictions on how these weapons can be used. And there is nothing that Putin can do about it.
Is this the point of the operation as well, that in the run-up to the American elections in November, and we know the Republicans have a very different attitude towards Ukraine than, let's say, the Democrats do, or than you would like the Republicans to have, are you trying to convince the growing number of skeptics in Washington that this is a war worth investing in?
The United States, and I would say in both parties, would always like to support the winners. Nobody wants to support the losers. And Ukraine has been winning the war with the capacity given by our foreign partners. All it gets to get Crimea back is to give us enough weapons to put the Crimean bridge down. And this can be done easily. And we can get our territories back, and this is what people want.
The image you're trying to show to Washington and to your Western allies is essentially the image that's on your T-shirt right now.
Well, I can tell you that this image on my T-shirt is very popular in Ukraine, because when we were told by all our foreign partners that Ukraine will surrender within 24 than 72 hours, I told them that even every woman and every kid will stand up, every granny in our country, and fight for our freedom. And trust me, Ukraine is not going to surrender or go down.
Final question. When the Nord Stream pipeline in the Baltic Sea was blown up, Ukraine, together with many other countries, was pointing the finger at Russia, that this was Russian sabotage. It turns out that the German authorities have a Ukrainian suspect.
I can tell you that our president for sure was not aware of this situation. And when we are talking about the word suspect, let's see what the investigation shows and what it's going to end up with, because we have seen Russians suspecting us, and a lot of this turns out to be the Russian propaganda. So I can definitely
these are German authorities saying they have a suspect they're looking for.
I can definitely tell you that our government and our president was not involved in any of the operations regarding Nord Stream 2. And we can assure you that this was not a governmental decision. And if we're talking about a Ukrainian that is being suspected, unfortunately, this is a citizen that has nothing to do with the governmental decision.
Alexandra Ustinova, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.